One of the things I want to go through today is the different types of collars there are. But I want to first start with a very common collar that we use, a flat buckle collar. This is your normal collar you hang your dog tags on. And what I'm going to show you is our objective when we're walking our dog is that the dog is not pulling us. And when we're working with a flat buckle collar, the dog actually is going to start pulling harder because they're trying to pull through the resistance I'm giving. So we've got somebody over here with some treats, and so we're going to try to build a little bit of drive into Ivory. And once she starts to go into drive, she's going to pull. So we're going to see what that looks like here. Okay, come on.
Ivory.
Okay, so once the leash goes tight, she's pulling. And she's a big dog. Oh boy, yeah, now she's going to take me for a ride. Okay, we work with these things all the time. So the main thing that I don't like about a flat buckle collar is that, number one, it puts all the pressure up here into the windpipe. So it'll actually start causing the dog to hack, they'll start coughing or whatnot because they can't breathe. So I don't like that it works that way. The second thing I don't like about it is it creates the oppositional reflex, which oppositional reflex is when the dog starts feeling resistance, the dog's going to start pulling harder. We're actually creating oppositional reflex, which is going to cause the dog to pull harder. So I'm not a big fan of these. I would give this flat buckle collar, as far as helping with pulling, I'd give it a thumbs down. The next thing we're going to talk about, I see this every once in a while, people have a head halter. Again, what we're trying to accomplish here is we're trying to keep the dog from pulling.
Ivory. 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 Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Okay, so I'm seeing some good and bad that comes with this particular tool. This is the first time I've really ever used one of these. And a couple thoughts that I have on this. Number one, the positive side of this is that it's controlling the head. And if you've ever been in any martial arts or wrestling, you know where the head goes, the body's going to follow. So if you can control the head, that's going to make it a lot easier to steer the dog. So steering was just fine. What I didn't like about it is the pressure is causing the dog's head to tilt sideways like this. And when the dog is pulling, the dog will still try to pull through that. So the other thing we have to consider too is when we're doing that, think about the spine alignment. And if we're cranking the dog's head sideways, that's going to be really tough on the vertebrae through the neck here. So I don't like this just because it puts the dog into a really uncomfortable position. I always think of, when I see that, all I can think of is if I woke up in the morning and I was sleeping wrong, my neck is going to be kinked. And that's exactly what I'm seeing as she's pulling, her head's just turning sideways. The other thing I'm not liking is the other pressure point is right here, and it's pushing this up into her eyes, and it's putting a lot of force onto the bridge of the nose as she starts pulling. So plus side of this is that you do have a little bit more control of the dog, but the dog still is going to pull, and when they do pull, it's going to make a very uncomfortable position for them to be in. So I would give this tool a thumbs down. One of the things is people always talk about aversives, that certain tools are aversive and others aren't. And what aversive means is it's a tool that's going to create discomfort. This is an aversive tool. To say that this is not an aversive tool, then the person doesn't understand what aversive tools really are. So we are making it uncomfortable. That's the whole point, is to turn the dog's head to make it uncomfortable so that they don't pull. The next tool I want to talk about is a no-pull harness. Now, the no-pull harness is basically the only thing really different on it is that the clip point is on the front, where most harness connections usually going to be on the back. So in theory, as we're walking, it's going to be very hard for the dog to walk straight. Okay, so no pull. She's pulling. She's pulling hard. Okay, come on, Ivory. Okay, I want to point out a couple things that I'm noticing. So as we're walking, right here's where all that weight is pushing into. So it's pushing the shoulder in. So think about it like if I'm walking all fours, which I don't normally do, but if I were, my shoulder's pushed in, so it reduces the range of motion I'm going to have, and that's going to also become very uncomfortable. So to say this isn't an aversive, it's an aversive. It's making it uncomfortable for the dog. So I'm noticing that. So the second issue I have with just harnesses in general is that harnesses by design are meant for pulling. There's a reason we put harnesses on sled dogs. There's a reason why we put them on search and rescue dogs, because we want the dog to pull. In this case, we're basically putting a harness on, and the only thing we're doing is changing the contact point, but the dog still wants to pull through this because of oppositional reflex. So we'll try this one more time. Okay, so somebody could be watching this and saying, well, this isn't a fair test because we're incentivizing the dog to try to get to the treats. Well, the reality is dogs live by drive, whether it's food drive, prey drive, there's all sorts of drives. So when you're out on a walk and another dog's coming the other way and your dog's starting to go nuts because of the dog's coming, your dog is in drive, and that's why the dog's pulling. So the tool itself, is it stopping the pulling? No. Is it reducing the pulling? A bit. But when she really wants to pull, when she was really getting into drive, I was fighting her. It's very difficult. So the one thing you got to keep in mind is what is this thing actually doing? Well, if you know anything about horses, a horse hobble restricts a horse so they can't get up to a full speed. That's in essence what's happening here. So when this pushes on that shoulder, if you were to watch the front leg, the dog kind of becomes a little bit gimp. You can see a little gimp in the walk, and it's just that it's not comfortable and it's changing the way the dog walks. So no pull harness to stop pulling. No, I would give it a thumbs down because it doesn't stop the pulling. It just, in fact, it's actually probably making the dog more uncomfortable because of what it's doing to where it's putting all this pressure. So what we have on Ivory right now is we actually have a pulling harness. It's designed for pulling sleds or whatever you want to pull. And I want to show what the difference is, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit. This is the first time I've ever used one of these, but conceptually I think I know already what's going to happen. So. Okay.
Yes! Yes, good girl! Yes!
So a couple of observations off of that. It did exactly as I suspected. It creates oppositional reflex. The moment I start putting pressure on to that resistance, the dog's going to actually start pulling harder, and she showed that. Now, a harness, these types of harnesses are going to be even way better because they're completely designed for comfort for the dog. So all the weight is coming through right on this chest plate here, it wraps around underneath here. So all of the pressure is put into there. That's not a painful spot. It's not a spot where we're getting restricting the dog's movement with the legs or anything like that. So our harness is good for stopping pulling. Absolutely not. They're designed for pulling. So if you're trying to stop the pulling, don't put a harness on. Granted, this one is made specifically for sled dogs. But I would give this a thumbs down for stopping pulling. The tool I'm going to show you next is a prong collar. Now this is what we use with every dog we work with, and there's a reason why we use it. And one of the things I want to point out right away, the way these things wrap around the neck, when it tightens up, it never puts pressure right where the windpipe is, so the dog will never choke themselves. The dog, it actually puts pressure around the entire neck, which actually leads into why this is such a great tool, because it's a communication device. So if I want the dog to come in, I'm just going to give a couple tugs that way. If I want the dog to go out, tugs that way. If I want the dog to slow down, I'm going to give a couple tugs that way, and the dog knows what I'm asking for at that point in time. So I'm going to show what a difference is. Now remember that if the leash goes tight, that means the dog's pulling. If the leash stays loose, the dog's not pulling. Okay, so we're going to build a little drive to get some treats, which should induce some pulling. Okay.
Ivory.
Okay, so that time, right at the end, she gave me a little pull. Outside of that, she was hedging a little bit, and I just gave real small corrections, and she corrected right back to where she's supposed to be. So try that again.
Ivory. Ivory. Ivory.
See how controlled she came in? And all it was just communication. Ivory, come. Okay, so a couple things I want to talk about with prongs. So if you noticed, the leash was almost never tight. I never let that leash go tight. I always just gave little slight corrections to get the dog to go where I wanted. That's exactly what this is. It's a communication device. And one of the things that I had mentioned before when we were talking about a head halter is that where the head goes, the body will follow. So when we're using this, I don't have to worry about making turns because I'm controlling where her direction of her head is going. So if I start making a turn, it's not a fight pulling her body weight like it was with the harnesses or the flat buckle collar. She just goes with me. There's just no, it's almost like if you ever had driven a vehicle that didn't have power steering and then you had a vehicle that had power steering, that's exactly what it's like. With those other tools, it's like you don't have power steering and all of a sudden now you got power steering. And look, the leash is loose. Make my turn, applied almost no pressure at all for that. So yes, this is an aversive tool. The head halter is an aversive tool. The no-pull harnesses are an aversive tool. The only two of these that aren't an aversive are the harness that's designed for sled pulling. That's the only one that's made to be comfortable. All the rest of these tools are made to be uncomfortable when the dog does something we don't want. So the prong is designed to be uncomfortable in a safe way. It doesn't hurt the dog, and this is why we go with it. It's like it's a technology jump. It allows us to do some things very quickly that we can't do utilizing other tools. So as you look at your tools, understand that all of them, for the most part, are aversive tools. They make it uncomfortable for the dog. So to think that the prong collar is any worse or any less than any others they're no different. They all create some level of discomfort for the dog.